Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 578. Who Wants a Byte? For Monday, February 3rd, 2020, it's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. The Super Bowl is upon us once again. And as we record this just a few hours before the biggest game in Adland, we reflect on the buzz surrounding the promised spots. We'll discuss the big ideas, how brands stoke the hype, and how they got the most value. Also, Super Bowling after a long hiatus, Maryland's new plan to tax digital advertising, the launch of social app Byte, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal of the Idea Integration Company. Mr. Saul Colt is here. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. Happy to be here.
Now, next, he's the founder and principal of Benevolent Mercenaries, creative director, Mr. Colin Glaum. Colin, what's up?
Long time no speak, Bob. I'm very excited to be back here in twice in 1 month.
In the U.S., too. You've been out of the country.
Exactly, yeah.
And finally, he's president and chief creative officer of AllScope and board member at Mashburn Enterprises. Mr. Jonathan Sackett joins us. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, Bob, you also forgot former rapper and baddest ad man on the planet.
Were you a rap hopper or a rapper, or were you more of a hip hopper?
It was more hip hop at the time because it was, what was I going to complain about? I wasn't shooting anybody, I wasn't getting shot at either.
Check out the YouTube video. That's all I'm saying to people. Well, moving on to the subject of the day. The Super Bowl is just hours away as we record this, and as usual, instead of caring about who's playing, sorry to the Chiefs and 49ers fans out there, we're here to talk about the ads we expect to be seeing. And this was a weird year in the ad game, bucking the trend of really early releases of the ads, as in past years. Most of the brands out there preferred to play their cards really close to the vest, using teasers and hinting at their ads right up to the week before the game. Jonathan, why is this trend back to the old days? What's bringing this back? Because, in previous years, you had most of the brands releasing their ads a couple weeks, if not a month beforehand, really trying to stoke up buzz that way. Now suddenly we're all into teasers and using all kinds of vehicles to try to get people interested in the ads, but not seeing the ads until the last minute. What's driving that?
Well, I think last year was a flop,
Yeah.
Even though they still had certain, they had okay numbers, but comparatively from previous years, last year was a flop. And I think what's happening is you're seeing a lot of brands and a lot of agency systems that are, influencing the brands, trying to make it elastic, make it elongate. So how can we have a longer teaser leading up to people actually leaning in to look forward to seeing our ads? The one thing that I'm not seeing, though, and I'm a little bit surprised about, and I'm interested in your guys' take on this, is I'm not seeing a lot of interactivity with device in a lot of these ads. I think there's there's
not a lot of mobile activity or mobile interactions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Have you guys seen the P&G one though? That really blew me away. That they're crowdsourcing basically what the outcome of the spot's going to be leading up to the Super Bowl. I thought that was a pretty cool experience, and it was very interactive.
Yeah, that's one, and I love that idea. I'm surprised that in today's you guys know as well as I do, everybody's got their phone on them, and they're going to have their phone on them. They're going to be tweeting about this and everything else. I'm just surprised that nobody's capitalizing on that ping pong effect.
Well, I'm
you know?
not,
Yeah.
I'm not all that familiar with what the metrics of success are for Super Bowl ads for a lot of these brands. I mean, so many of them tried that mobile interactivity and maybe just didn't get the value they were expecting out of it, and have now turned more to a content play. Because what I am seeing is, you know, it's not just the ad that's shot for the Super Bowl, it's also the teaser, and then it's also the follow-up content, and it's the extended version of the spot. And it seems like they're playing it more as a content marketing play as opposed to any kind of interactivity, which may make more sense for the brand's value over time. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, so I think that the people are moving away from the interactivity, or maybe not just the interactivity, but to more of a content play, because it's been proven over and over and over that Super Bowl ads don't sell product. It's about hype, it's about conversation, it's about awareness. So, you know, there shouldn't really be a clear call to action, or because I think it's been wasted. Personally, I have a different view on this than Jonathan. I think this is the year that the Super Bowl ad jumped the shark. And you could make plenty of you know, comments that it jumped the shark a long time ago, but I think a lot of people are doing teaser ads because deep down in their heart, they know the ads aren't very good this year. Like I've seen all the ones that were publicly released, and you know, most of them are really cringeworthy. Like the Google Loretta one, I think Google Loretta, that's really good. But you look at the avocado ones, and the Cheetos ones was pretty
Oh
good.
my God, that avocado one was horrible.
Yeah, even the Ellen DeGeneres Alexa ad, like it was more of an ad for the Victorian costumes you can buy on Amazon
I
than
was
it
going to
was
say
for.
it's an ad for the History Channel.
Yeah, like the ads just aren't very good this year or clever. And I've got a lot of thoughts on this that, you know, we can go on forever about this, but you know, I think, you know, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. The purpose of buying a Super Bowl ad is about you know, winning that Entertainment Tonight slot, not about selling ads. It's really more for the advertiser agencies winning awards than anything to do with the brand or the product. And that shift has to go way back in another direction. We're going to talk later in the show about why brands are coming back to the Super Bowl. I've got strong opinions on that, but man, people plan for Super Bowl ads for a full year, and this is all we got.
Well,
Even the planters, you know, 2 weeks ago I made a joke about the planter peanut coming back as a honey roasted peanut and from a fire, and you know, I was half joking that they were looking for a darker peanut to approach a wider audience. I got an email after that show that said I was correct, and they, you know, we've heard the stories about them pulling the ads, or at least pausing the ads, in light of Kobe Bryant, because they didn't want like him being in a fire. But apparently that is the payout of that ad, which is kind of hilarious that I said it as a joke, and that was the whole payout. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see if I'm right.
I'm gonna take a strong stance against this, but I do want us to all kind of remember what the purpose of the Super Bowl is, and then also what the ads role in it is, right? So part of it is it's part of one of the biggest entertainment days of the year, right? And the idea that you're there to be part of that evening, and hopefully, you know, the pre-buzz and the post conversation is the gravy on top. These people are paying a tremendous amount of money. A lot of it's ego driven. I agree. I admit to that, especially when it comes from the agency side or the CMO who's involved. But when it comes down to the work, all you're trying to do is entertain. All right. And some of the work that I've seen this year, at least compared to last year, is markedly better in terms of entertainment. I'm going to call out a couple of friends. I do like the Alexa spot. I thought it was hilarious to go back in time and look at like how people did the exact same thing that we now take for granted by talking to a machine that sits in our living room. So I thought that was pretty clever, even though it's not all about the product. And that's the guys at Lucky Generals, I think, do a brilliant job steering that brand day to day, not just when it comes to the Super Bowl spot. And then the other one that I really enjoyed that was topical was the Snickers spot. I mean, really funny take on the woes of the world today. And maybe it's because the world is broken. We just need to feed it some Snickers. I thought that was pretty funny. Another one that almost, I'm not sure what the backlash is going to be, because as soon as I saw the helicopter in that spot, I was like, oh dear God, this could go horribly wrong for them, just given what happened last week. So there's some pretty funny spots out there. I'm not going to say they're the best advertising in the world, but they're entertaining and they're funny, and they're supposed to do that for today's event.
My take on it is that the ads have always had a bunch of clunkers and maybe one or two standouts. And this year it seems like there's more standouts than clunkers. So I mean, while I agree with you, Saul, that overall there's a lot of really bad ads out there, and that if you look at the bad ads alone, it looks like a terrible year. There are some really outstanding, executions that are going on. I mean, the Cheetos ad is really funny. It's just like, and I think people are going to really like it. The Google ad is exceptional. It's one of those ads that people will talk about for years to come. There's some really incredible standout ads this year, and it surprised me at how good it was. It was almost like we finally got over 2017 when everybody went dark and went political and went these really introspective ads in the post.
Maybe kids dying in bathtubs. But so I called out the Google and the Cheetos. I agree. Those are really great ads. I guess, as someone who grew up with the phenomenon and the myth of the Super Bowl ad, I find it interesting that a lot of brands have gone away from, like, Super Bowl ads were never about moving product. It was about ego. It was about conversation. It was about awareness. And that's fine as long as you go into it knowing that that's what it's about. But nobody's trying to create a phenomenon anymore, which I think is interesting. Like, I don't know how many years out we are from Budweiser's What's Up. And while it's not on the tip of people's tongues and people aren't using it as part of their, conversation, you immediately know it when you hear it.
Well, they've got a similar ad out there this year, the Smart Pack. I mean, Smart Pack is going to have the same effect as What's Up. People are going to be walking around all day on Monday going Smart Pack. And I think that there are moments like that in the bowl.
Not.
Well, I'm not saying it's...
I lived in Boston, man. I'm done.
Well, however you feel about Boston, it's still kind of meme-worthy.
Well, the one thing that the point that I wanted to make was, like, have you guys seen, they did this a few years ago, the app for 19 Crimes Wine. Are you guys familiar with this?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, if you have the app, you can go up to the wine bottle, hold your camera up to it,
right,
and the label will start talking to you about the crime that this particular person did.
Right, it's an AR.
All I'm saying is if you want to elasticize, elongate, make it live longer, however you want to put it, you could do that same thing leading up to the Super Bowl ad, have some real estate on these people's smartphones and have it interact and deliver the punchline to the people's phone. And I think that would... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, to that point, there have been in the last couple of years some genius people who have co-opted the Super Bowl, and we're not going to know about that until tonight or tomorrow, right? So we're having a dialogue about what's already been released, but there are people that have plans out there that are going to be very heavily digitally based that we're only going to find out, about through weird search queries or some kind of activation that's going to happen in the middle of the game. That's going to completely change our conversation about this later tonight or tomorrow.
Well, there's also the ads that haven't been released. I mean, Olay still has not released what their ad is going to be. And
I don't know what that thing looks so weird.
It looks so bizarre and almost. I mean, apparently it's being
something now.
Well, apparently it's being really well. I mean, the buzz is good among feminists, but I kind of look at it as kind of insulting to women. I'm not really sure what they're trying to do.
It makes them look a little bit childish in the situation that they put them in. So I'm not sure how that's going to unfold. That one's I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, to be honest. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about that.
You take the bullet on that one.
Well, I'm not taking any bullet. I'm just saying it just feels a little insulting. I'm not sure where they're going with it and really can't judge it until I see it. But there are some big ads that have not been released yet that could steal the show. I mean, You never know
the
what's
little
happening.
Nas X and Sam Elliott. That one looks like it's going to be amazing.
No, I saw it. It's terrible.
Oh, really?
I saw it too.
It's terrible.
You know what I'm surprised with, and this popped in my head while I was Googling for all these ads to, know what I was talking about on the show. I'm amazed a big brand. Do you guys remember? I don't remember how many years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Pepsi got headlines by saying we're not advertising in the Super Bowl this year, and it became a thing that they weren't advertising, and they donated the money that they were going to do to, I forget what the cause was or something.
No, to whatever cause they had you could put in, could apply for.
Digital,
it was their own thing. I'm amazed that a brand hasn't, and this isn't as good as donating to a cause, so don't think I'm saying that this is altruistic. It's the furthest thing from altruistic. But I was Googling all these commercials because a lot of the Roundup ads, they just weren't serving the videos for some reason. And man, there's an opportunity for a big brand to just buy all the YouTube ads for the Super Bowl ads. And actually...
That's exactly what I was describing. So
yeah,
I think it was last year or a year before, IKEA and some other housewares company both had a very similar idea where they just bought Super Bowl advertising online, and the homeware ones was actually selling bowls, which I thought was hilarious. So every time you typed in Super Bowl, you ended up getting a link to this houseware company. I think it was Home Goods or somebody like that was actually selling bowls. And they were like, yeah, our bowls are super. And they would do all these amazing, like, interstitial, like, little 15-second vignettes.
But that's co-opting the bowl, which is what you were talking about, Colin. I think what Saul is talking about is actually doing the digital buy for the Super Bowl streaming on YouTube, because they are doing that. I mean, it's just like YouTube is the official streamer of the Super Bowl. Am I right about that, Saul?
Well, the Super Bowl, but also grab like a month before the Super Bowl, as all these Super Bowl ads start getting released, you want to buy all of those videos. There's a real opportunity to release a Super Bowl ad without ever actually buying a Super Bowl ad. And I don't see people actually trying to do that the way they used to.
You know who's famous for doing that actually is
so you were saying exactly what Colin was saying, and I'm the idiot. Sorry.
No, not the idiot. It's a different idea.
Yeah, different idea. Same level of thought, right? It's like, we used to do this for Olympic advertising. So wherever the Olympics are going to be, you blanket that environment for 3 months leading up to it. And then when the IOC comes in and says everything has to come down, invariably they can't take down everything because some of the stuff's just like permanent advertising. And so you end up being in that environment for the Olympics, for that event, for a fraction of the cost. And you can do the same thing. The Old Spice ad, everyone thought that was a Super Bowl spot. That actually broke 3 months before that. And everyone associated it with the Super Bowl because it was such a great spot. It was so memorable, but everyone associates it with the Super Bowl spot. They didn't pay those dollars for it.
Right. They even when they ran it after the Super Bowl, and I mean, I know they ran it before the Super Bowl and weeks before, but they did run it on Super Bowl Sunday, but they ran it after the event. And it's just like, it still was strong enough to have the buzz of being a Super Bowl ad.
Mm-hmm.
I've always told brands, and people are, nobody wants to, fight with the trademark. I've asked a bunch of my clients, let's create a really slick ad, release it a month before the Super Bowl, put it up on YouTube, label it our Super Bowl ad, and have people get all like caught up in the hype. And then nobody even would remember if they saw it or not during the game because they've already seen it before a Super Bowl. And I'm amazed nobody's ever bitten on that idea.
Well, you can't use the word Super Bowl in any kind of association with your ad, or else you get caught.
The big game, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
but imagine when somebody from a PR standpoint or an influencer or a vlogger starts scraping the internet and pulls all their things together and makes their own content out of it, and they bring you along for it. I mean, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that got me over and over again. I did that event for the American Marketing Association Southern Connecticut chapter, doing a pre-bowl game, and I was trying to pull the ads ahead of time, and I got caught in the teaser trap because I kept ending up with these ads in my deck that turned out not to be ads from this year or not to be ads for the Super Bowl. It was like all this trickery going on because of these aggregators. As it turns out, the day of the event was the day that all the ads dropped, so I frantically had to recreate my deck at the last minute, but it turned out to be good. That's just a little personal story about all that. But
I'm breaking out my world's smallest violin for you.
I know, but let's talk about the planners thing before we come off of this. I mean, planners did have a really, really kind of buzzworthy ad that was getting a lot of attention, a lot of news story, most of it negative, but as they say, all press is good press, until the press became Kobe Bryant and they had this big funeral thing going on online. They had to pause their social efforts, even though they didn't kill the social efforts, they kept it alive, the RIP planners. What's the game plan here? What do you think's going to happen? I mean, we talked a little bit about this last week, Saul, so let the other guys kind of weigh in what they think here.
Colin.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What's
planners killed off their mascot.
Oh, planters. I thought I'm sitting here picturing strategists.
Yeah, I was, Bob, I was looking at that like this was going to be another Brian from Family Guy. You remember that whole debacle?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's what I think and what I thought was going to happen is that you can't kill off your main character. You always find a way to bring it back and resurrect it. So I'm assuming that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, and I think Saul's opinion is probably pretty correct, which is going on, but we'll have to see how that's gonna play out. But it's really very, very strange and an odd position that they've gotten themselves into. Well, let's move on and talk next about the fact that a lot of the brands out there, a lot of the brands that have been on hiatus from the Super Bowl have suddenly come back. I mean, while the occasional brand will come back to the Super Bowl after a long hiatus, this year a whole host of them came back. We've got Porsche back after 23 years. We've got New York Life after 30 years. We've got Cheetos after 11 years, which begs the question, Colin, why now? What's going on in the marketplace or in advertising as a whole that made the Super Bowl so attractive to so many brands that have been sitting on the sidelines for years?
So from my standpoint, I mean, I could lean back on what I said earlier. I think a lot of it is predicated by ego. There's a couple of people who drive these decisions, right? And you have to be willing to put your job or your role in the company on the line when you're making these kinds of decisions. So I think there's a certain amount of ego associated with it. But if you look at the companies that are jumping back in, it's probably because they have something large to announce. They might have a new product or a new campaign that they want to make a big splash with. Just for what it's worth, as an aside, I watched the masterclass last night with Goodby Silverstein, and certain agencies are also associated with these kinds of Super Bowl campaigns. Whether it's BBDO or Goodby Silverstein, a few others out there that really kind of drive this. There's a certain amount of if we want to be part of the cultural gestalt and the talk value associated with it, then this is the place to do it. There's very few places in the linear TV world that draw the kind of audience that the Super Bowl does. I think maybe the Grammys follows up number 2. But outside of that, maybe the World Cup, there's very few things that aren't sporting events that draw this kind of eyeballs and can make this kind of talk value for a brand. Having said that, you're not making these decisions based on ROI, as Saul said earlier. There's not too many examples of unbelievable sales after the fact. What you end up with is brand value, perceived value, engagement, things like that, affinity for the brand. All those can go up, but I don't know that your people are marching out to the store and buying your product right away, right after this, unless you've kind of cracked some kind of code. That's not usually why people do this. They do it for a completely different set of reasons, and you have to look at the different brands that are associated with it. I don't know the AORs of the different companies that you mentioned who are jumping back in for the first time, but chances are there's maybe a new CEO, a new campaign or new product that needs to be announced, and or a new agency relationship with somebody who's had experience doing this, and this is how they operate.
Yeah,
So I like what you said about sort of the ego-driven thing is one of the things I was thinking of earlier, and I'm pretty much just saying the same thing you're saying, but coming at it from even the same angle. I mentioned earlier that I grew up with the myth of the Super Bowl ads, and we've talked many times about how the lifetime value of a CMO at a company is usually about 15 to 18 months. There's been so much churn in the high level marketing roles of some of these companies that have vanished for 20 years that it's much younger people who grew up in the glitz and the glamour and the hype of it, and this is their first crack at it, and they've probably been waiting their whole career to do something like this, and they want this to be on their resume. One thing that I think is really interesting though is Porsche coming back, because Porsche is one of my favorite brands. I'd like to own one day. It's like they're right up there for me. I know the brand pretty intimately because I pay attention. I can't see them making a memorable ad because it sort of isn't their brand. So when you think of spending all the money for a Super Bowl ad, absolutely it's ego. And yes, they're announcing a new car, so they fit in that category of a new product announcement. But if someone was really being responsible, I would advise them that same amount of money that they used on a Super Bowl ad, they could literally be everywhere for the next 3 months instead of swinging for swinging for the fences right here, where it doesn't seem like a brand fit. Like they're going to show you a beautiful ad with a beautiful car with some reflective qualities, some great lighting and maybe a mirror finish on the hood, and you'll see the Porsche logo. It'll be driving through mountains. There'll be two beautiful people driving, but nobody's going to unwind the window and say "What's up?"
Have you seen the Porsche ad? Because it's been out for a while, and it's.
I haven't seen it. Did I nail it?
No, it's exceptional. I mean, it's just
all their stuff's exceptional, but it's not.
You know what's funny, Bob? I mistakenly thought the family tree was a Super Bowl ad for Porsche. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
They show all the cars over the years of Porsches going through the desert, and all of a sudden they all branch off and they make a big tree.
No, the Super Bowl ad that they have right now is a car chase, and it's amazing because it highlights the new features of the new car, which is that it's an electric vehicle, and they show it being snuck out of a museum because it doesn't make any sound. So they're getting out of the Porsche museum. Then it trips off an alarm, and suddenly everybody jumps in a different Porsche from a different era, and they go in this car chase through the European mountains, wherever they are, and
Bavaria.
Yeah, it's really spectacular, and the long cut is like 2.5 minutes. It's really super interesting, and for me, just to counter what you're saying, Saul, I don't think that Porsche is a brand that needs to advertise everywhere to get recognition and awareness. What they need to do is make a big splash, let people know there's something new, and remind them of how cool that brand is. And people will always search for Porsche. I mean, how you feel about Porsche is how most people feel about Porsche. And they're going to go after them.
Yeah, I will tell you guys, I have owned 6 of them and I have totaled 2. So I'm still an advocate. I still have one. But yeah, I see your point for both of you guys. I don't think Porsche is a brand that's established. It doesn't need to do that, but they do a very good job in their advertising historically of going back in time. So it sounds like they're doing that again this year. I love it when they go back to their heritage and their legacy. I think that's cool. And they make a damn good car that you can walk away from these crashes, let me tell you.
Yeah, I've seen your face after one of those crashes.
Okay, well, yeah, there's that.
Well, is this a vote for the ad unit's effectiveness, or is this more about surrounding value creating opportunities? Like, I mentioned the fact that so many of the brands are doing extended cuts and doing additional content and really looking at the entire surrounding value of content creation as opposed to just looking at the ad unit. I'm wondering if that reality, the digital reality that's going on in our world that allows for so many content extensions, is what's driving people back to the bowl game and going, this is our opportunity to really get a lot of attention that's going to have lasting value as opposed to just that 30 or 60 seconds during the game.
Well, the one thing that we're not mentioning though, and I'm curious to hear your guys' opinion on this, is that I think this year is going to be a good game. I do. I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah, but
I'm
nobody knew that when they bought their ads.
No. I agree with that. But what they did was, if you like, I'm an avid football fan, so I've been watching this for months, watching it unfold, and I think no matter who would have gotten in, we would have had a good battle. So that there's that. Number two is the halftime show. I think you've got a lot of guys leaning in that want to watch this. I'm sure a lot of the women do too. But I think that they did the right amount of build up, the right amount of hype, and it's not going to be a blowout game like it has been in the past. Even though you're talking about media buys done months ago, what happens is if it's a crap season, by the time you get to the Super Bowl, people are burned out and don't want to watch it anyway. And the halftime shows haven't been very good either.
I will take a counterpoint to that. My take on this is that ever since like the mid 2000s, 2003, 2004, the elasticity of the Super Bowl has expanded dramatically, right? Because of the advent of the internet, or at least the internet as we now see it today, pre-mobile even. You had the ability to start to do teasers, and that's weird that we're coming back to a original format, which was the original way that if this was done. You would give a 15 or 30-second version of what was going to be a 60 on the day of Super Bowl, or tease something that was going to be a 2-minute online later down the line. They're coming back to that format, but there's additional, like the Snicker spot has like I think 6 different cuts that you can find online. So there's tons of different buttons. There's funny little outtakes. There's all kinds of stuff that they can build into these productions. So if you're gonna spend what was it 5.6 or whatever it is on the media buy, and like
5.6 for a 30
to $1 million on the production, you're going to try and get as much bang for your buck as possible, and you're going to really want to extend that window of opportunity from 2 weeks before the Super Bowl to as much as 2 months after it. In terms of the content and the buzz you create from a PR standpoint.
I'm sorry, Bob, what did you say about the 5.6?
It's 5.6 for a 30 second. I mean, it's over 11 million for a 60, which is what most of these brands are spending per brand. I mean, there's very few 30s. Most of them have gone in for full 60s.
Can we also just talk about Bloomberg forcing Trump to buy one because he went in on it?
I'm not so sure that's the way it went down. I think that the Bloomberg campaign heard rumblings that the Trump campaign had bought one already, and so they went in big, knowing that he had done so or ahead of time.
I would love to see Bloomberg's strategy just to be to bleed him dry. Just like wherever I'm going to be, he has to be. So I'm going to go spend this much money, because he would blindly do it just to try and keep up with him. I think it would, and he's got way more money than Trump does. So I think that would be an amazing political strategy. Sidebar, sorry.
Yeah, well, let's spend just a minute. I don't want to talk too much about the political angle, but it is interesting to me that nobody has ever bought a national campaign for a presidential election or any election. Nobody's bought a national Super Bowl ad. Now, a lot of the candidates, the press is saying a lot of the candidates like Obama bought local Super Bowl ads during that run up, but nobody's bought the national ad. Why do you think that's happening?
Because you don't want to spend money on people that aren't going to vote for you. You want to, it's the same reason that they pick certain geographies to go campaign in person. They go to where, there's larger number of votes in the electoral college.
Well, that's the way it was. That's the way it was before. These guys, both Trump and Bloomberg, have bought the national ad, and they're the first to do it. Well, why did they do that?
It goes back to what Colin said. In their particular case, it's 100% ego.
But I would also say that it's because our politics right now are so polarized. If you had asked the exact same question in the 70s, I would have said it was probably because of austerity measures, right? But in the 70s, if you ran a political ad, you could have been talking to people that could have voted either way, because there was much more moderation at the time. Now we're looking at a two ends of a coin that aren't even on the same, they're not even on the same plane anymore to have the conversation. So to Sal's point, you really want to highly target your money, and don't spend it on people who are going to just outright dismiss you right away. So there is no middle ground. This is like one of the true middle grounds of America, where everyone, Republican, Democrat, every ethnicity, every political background or socioeconomic background, all come together to join into one communal experience. And that so rarely happens in this country anymore.
Well, it sounds like you
So
both are saying different things. I mean, Saul's saying that it's all about ego, while you're saying that it's a cross section of America and could be an effective ad. And I'm wondering.
no, it's not. But it's not going to be an effective ad because, like, I think the reason that advertisers buy against it is because of what I just said. The reason that a politician would never buy against it is because the way that politics are so fractured right now. You only want to talk to your base. You don't want to talk to the other team's base because they're not going to see eye to eye.
Well, I'm to throw one last counter at this, which is that Bloomberg knows something. I'm convinced about this. He would not be in this race if he didn't have like rock solid data that said this is how you should go and you could win if you do these things.
I don't know about that. I think that he's literally going to be a sacrificial lamb, and he's willing to put his money into the race to do that. He's so well positioned. I don't know what you know about him, but he goes around the globe teaching other mayors how to be the mayor that he was in New York City, which was essentially like, if you have the financial resources, help pay for and lift your city out of terrible financial situations and make it a better place to live, make it more socially acceptable, make it more progressive, make it more literate, make it more proactive from a LGBT situation, make it more beautiful from an architectural standpoint. He literally goes around and teaches these seminars with his own money in order to make other mayors more empowered the way he was, so that they can actually perform on a national stage. And he's so well positioned doing that. He doesn't really need to win the presidency, nor do I think he even wants to win the presidency. But does he want to make sure that Trump is not the president? Yes, absolutely. And so he's willing to put his money where his mouth is when it comes to that. I don't think he thinks he's going to win. I think he thinks that he's going to help defeat Donald Trump.
No, I don't see how he does that with his strategy. But like I say, he knows something, and I don't know what his plan is, but it's going places. Well, let's move on because we've got a couple other stories that are not Super Bowl related that came up in the news headlines this week. Maryland has a semi-good idea. As a way to fund their failing public schools in cities like Baltimore, they've decided to tax digital advertising. Sounds like a pretty reasonable plan. A proposed bill for the tax claims it could generate $250 million a year in revenue. But the A&A and ad publishers are freaking out over it, and they've got a lot of legitimate concerns, Jonathan. What is at the heart of the dispute, and why is it that we're all in our industry and in the publishing industry so against a digital ad tax in Maryland?
Well, here we go. Roll up your sleeves, boys. I love the idea. First of all, Maryland's been, as we all know, has been hit really hard. And the only thing that seems to be selling there is cannabis. We've got a dispensary there, FYI. So it's for medicinal purposes only. But I think the lawmakers don't have a good rock solid understanding of how this works, because I kind of looked at this situation, and I've mentioned this scenario before of the bullet versus the bulletproof vest, right? Mm-hmm. You make a better, faster bullet that's more penetrative. You make the weave on the vest tighter. And it's just this competition of back and forth. And what's going to happen, I think what's going to happen with this scenario is that, you can do IP bounces, right? So the only way to truly match back to an IP so that you can tax it is if it's not bouncing between 30 servers or from 30 destinations. So what's going to happen is you're just going to make advertisers make the ads bounce around from different IPs so that they don't get taxed. You're almost inviting that to happen. It's not a linear path from creative to posting to narrative. It doesn't work in a linear fashion that way. So I don't know how they could actually do it and make it fair. Now, again, they're talking about, I think you have to spend, isn't it like over $100 million?
Yeah, the cap is only advertisers who it's only a tax on ad platforms. So
right, exactly.
So it's ad platforms that are making $100 million a year. Yeah, $100 million a year in ad revenue are the only ones affected. which is a lot. I mean, it's a lot of advertisers. It's not just Google and Facebook and the like people like that. I mean, we're talking about, lots of companies make $100 million a year, and I think it's in global ad revenue. It's not based on how much ad revenue is generated in the state of Maryland. So it's a sizable community that they're going after, but it seems like every publisher I was reading was freaking out about it, and I don't know that every publisher needs to worry about this.
Well, I think
They
it
don't.
looks. I don't think they do either. I think what they're worried about is it's setting a precedent, and once you hit that threshold of 100 million, is it going to come down from there, and then you start taxing the 25 and the 50 millions? I think that's what the concern is.
Without sounding like the annoying young digital guy.
You're not so young, my friend.
I'm not. But
he's not very digital either.
I'm going to sound like that. The way that you do this, Jonathan, is through blockchain. Everyone has the exact same set of data. Everyone knows where that lead or where that authorization came from in terms of the bid. And then you have a ledger that's associated with it that the state can go back and look at and say, okay, you owe us this much, you owe us this much, you owe us this much, based on how the transaction would work.
Yeah, but what's the incentive for ad publishers or ad platforms to even do that? I mean, to get in place a blockchain system so that they can get taxed?
It should be the law. It's not. There's no incentive for them to put it in place. The state should say, hey, if you want to operate and you want to sell ads to people in my constituency, this is how it's going to run. And it should just be a law. In my opinion, this is a genius idea that's going to help elevate our school systems. It's going to help get cities that are like the most marginalized people, the people that are most likely and susceptible to digital advertising are the ones that should be like being reimbursed for that behavior. And this to me is a genius idea that's either raising too many red flags or needs to be really carefully constructed so that it can be successful in other markets.
So you mentioned the school angle of it, and just to be clear for people who haven't read about this, the state is saying this will generate enough money for us to fix our school problem, and they're making a direct one-to-one relationship between this tax and school funding. The same way you're proposing blockchain, I think there has to be at least a similar accountability to show that this money actually is used to fix the school system. Because I read a lot of I read a lot of comments on the articles, and apparently there's been a bunch of initiatives like this in the past that have said they're going to go fix the school system, and they've never actually followed through. So locals are actually even fatigued by these promises, and they're skeptical that it'll actually come to fruition to the intended use that they're promising.
Yeah, it starts with the promise. Look, I'm all about helping the schools, and if there's yet another tax that will go to that directly and help out, I think that's great. But you got to remember, I live in Chicago, and here the toll system on the roads was supposed to all be closed by like 1965. That was the promise to the taxpayers. Well, they've expanded it, and it's never gone away. And what year is it now? I think people are concerned about the precedent that this could set. And that does concern me as well. But I think, Saul, that you bring up a really valid point is, okay, if you can match that money going from A to its correct destination B, then I think it's a great idea, as long as the execution can track it back and validate it, and the money goes where it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And just to be clear, Colin, you're saying that a blockchain solution could solve the problem that they're having right now, which is the current plan is just to say if there's a verified ad served to a constituent through IP matching in Maryland, then the tax would be levied against the platform or the publisher. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case if they're bouncing IPs, like Jonathan was saying. So blockchain is the answer, are we saying, or is there any other solution besides that?
I mean, the only thing that is available right now would be blockchain. The ultimate situation would be that it all runs through one centralized repository. But our digital ecosystem is so varied and so fractured that
that's right.
Trying to unify that would be an absolute nightmare. So the idea that everyone would get on at least some version of blockchain to allow for complete transparency and a ledger associated with where the different ad units and bids are coming from would be one degree of transparency that we currently don't have.
And it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, considering that most of the ad publishers are looking at blockchain solutions or some kind of solution like that in order to avoid ad fraud, which is a real problem for the.
Yeah, and that's I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, which I know you've talked about extensively on the show, but that's another reason to bring that into the forefront, because one of the biggest issues we're all challenged with is whether or not we're actually serving ads to the right people or even people at all. So I think the combination of both of those reasons, there's another arrow in the quiver of the media companies that need to start to address the fact that when we're spending tremendous amounts of money with the likes of Facebook or Google or whatever programmatic platforms we're tying into, and none of them can look us straight in the eye and tell us that we're actually getting what we're paying for.
I
would be at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I like it, Colin, that you said if they're people at all. You're absolutely right.
Exactly. Well, I want to move on to the final topic. Vine is back, sort of. Byte is a new social platform from one of Vine's founders. If you don't remember Vine, it was the 6-second video platform that Twitter bought and promptly killed because it didn't want to do any rev sharing with its content creators. And this new platform is designed to address many of those issues of rev sharing that plagued the original app. But Saul, has the landscape changed too much for this kind of app to survive? I mean, we've got TikTok, we've got Instagram really dominating. Neither of them are based on 6-second videos. Both are expanding beyond that. Is Vine even a thing that worth bringing back to life as Byte?
No. So, firstly, I'll say Byte
Next
is
question.
Great. Well, now, first I say Byte is a great name, and it's in nostalgically, it's fun to see this back. But this is so far from a sure thing success. I can't even explain it, but I'm going to try. The world has changed since Vine was a thing. Like 6 seconds worked because in 2012, I think 2013, when it came out, we didn't have unlimited data plans. Hardware wasn't where it was today, and creators made this something really great. They pushed the limits of, stop motion photography and personality. But, kind of what you said now with Instagram stories, or just the fact that you can live stream something at any time. There's no thought that goes into it anymore. There's no pressure. People are so accustomed to it. Why would we ever go back to restrictions? Like why would we go back to 6 seconds? If you think about it, one of the things that's most popular right now, I'm sure everybody has at least seen them in Instagram stories, is all these, floating head things to find out what Disney character you are or what, Marvel superhero you are. You couldn't even do that in 6 seconds. So, customer expectation and everything has changed since 6 seconds was a thing. I think this is going to be popular for about 6 seconds.
What do the rest of you feel? I mean, it's just like, can 6 seconds? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to throw out a counterpoint.
You're wrong.
So this is a theory that is based in dating apps, but I think it extends to social media. So much like nightlife or nightclubs in any city, things are hot for a year, 2, maybe 3 if you're really lucky, and then everyone moves on. That collective cool group moves on to another place. The same thing is happening with dating apps, and so there's a constant need for new dating apps. Even though you think you've seen every permutation of it, people migrate to what's new because it's new and different, and it offers a new possibility for them. They're offering hope, or whatever it might be. At least in the dating world, is hope. So social media is doing the exact same thing. And I think there's going to be a constant evolution and jumping of new ideas or new things that spring up that come back around. I don't know if we need another 6 second, vehicle, but these kinds of new media companies are going to spring up all the time, and we're going to continue to see them thrive and grow, and they're going to take bites and pieces out of the old established ones. Because as soon as something like Facebook, as an example, is they're growing, but they're growing internationally, right? They're growing on a global scale. They're not growing because of new people are going, oh, I have to be on Facebook. New people are getting phones as young people. They're like, I have to be on TikTok, right? They don't want to be on Facebook because their parents are on Facebook. So there's going to be a constant evolution of this. And I don't think that, especially with the pedigree that he has, and the work that he's done in the past, I think Byte, and I think another thing that we have to talk about, the reason that the name is clever is because it's BYTE, for those of you who haven't seen it. It's not BITE. The platform is going to be a success, and it's going to be a success because people like novel, they like new things, and the younger cohort that's coming in needs that to differentiate themselves from the previous generations.
But it's not.
the difference.
It's not. Let me just jump in. It's not new what they're doing. What they're doing is bringing back the 6-second video platform with some rev share thrown in. I mean,
but it's new. It's new to a new person. Like, let's talk about the 13-year-old kid who's going to be famous on it. It's new to that kid, right? And that's what they're looking for. They want to be part of the discovery. They want to be. I actually signed up for it because if it's the new thing, I want to be on it, right? So me being on it doesn't mean that I'm going to be famous on it. It just means that I need to be intelligent about it for my job and for my success. But there are people out there that are looking at it as a gold rush and as an opportunity. And there's going to be enough people that flow into it that make it so. Even if it's just 10,000 users in the first couple of months, and then 100,000 users after the first year, and then 1 million after the second year. If they hit those numbers, which is not unreasonable at all, it's going to be a success.
I got 2 words for you: Google Plus. But let's go to Saul. And
that's an old company trying to do a new trick. This is a new company doing an old trick. But an old company doing a new trick is way better than an old company trying to do a new trick.
I'm not so sure I agree, but Saul, what are your thoughts? Saul, did you disappear?
Let's talk about Saul.
Let's talk about Saul.
I stand by my opinion here. You're wrong in this case, but you've been right other times, so it's not a universal wrong. It's just about this particular thing.
Well,
but the reason your dating app analogy doesn't work is the promise of a dating app is you're going to get a little like stomach to stomach contact. We're not allowed to swear on the show, so use your imagination. But when you go to these like new things, I think the big barrier for a lot of people, and yes, there's always people who are going to go in and be the first. I went and got an Elo account. I never used it, but I at least locked my name up. But there's such a difference between having to grow a new audience in a new place when you've already established, a little bit of a foothold in TikTok, and maybe you've already got a couple brands sniffing around willing to give you a little money. But we talk a lot of time about the 5-second ad on YouTube videos. You can't say anything in a 5-second ad. There's such a waste of money. So why would any brands run over to Byte? And when you talk about being a celebrity, what's the point of being a poor celebrity if no brands are giving you money? Just having
Saul, I'm so disappointed in your narrow view of life. 6 seconds. 6 seconds is more than enough time to share a thought, communicate an emotion, a feeling. I mean, you saw how rich the content was on Vine, and he's got that built-in community. Do you think he forgot about all those users that he had?
But they're gone. They're not there, though. They're not there. They didn't wait around for him to come back. They went. They aged out of it. They're doing other things. You're telling me that some of these people who created, like, Vine was cool. There were some people who did really incredible stop motion stuff. Well, now they can do something so much more meaningful on these other platforms. Like you say, it's a new company doing an old thing. Old isn't cool anymore. I know this because I'm old, and like nobody wants to hang out with me.
The only reason I said old thing is because somebody did 6 seconds before. But the reality of the situation is, I'm gonna lay a $1 wager on you that they have more than 1 million users on this date next year.
But it's not about number of users; it's quality of users. Like, what if it becomes Friendster? And all these users are in a faraway country, and it becomes the number one thing in like a third world nation. Like, the number of users is immaterial. It's about quality.
Well, I don't disagree with the quality statement either. But if you sit down in front of a VC or a person who's willing to invest in that platform. It's about the number of users that are getting on that platform and the rate at which they're growing.
But Second Life still, well, no, absolutely not, because I've had 100 conversations with VCs in the last month, and in the year 2020, it's all about revenue. Nobody's going on traction anymore. But that's an aside. Second Life still has 1 million users. Would you say Second Life is relevant or popular? It's like there's still people in there. They're still hammering away, but it's not anywhere that people are going and setting up new accounts.
No, that's why I said growth. Like you can't just cap out at 1 million users and then just stop. But if they level up to 1 million users in less than a year, I think there's real traction there, and the traction is going to bring investment.
Well, with that, it's time for the fair, fail, foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do their shameless plug, starting with Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com, right? Or it's theideaintegration.com. Why am I always so tripped up by that? I should know this by now. Tell us what's going on.
Best spokesperson in the business.
Sorry about that.
So at the Idea Integration Company, we're experts in word of mouth and experiential marketing. We've got a couple things launching towards the end of the month that I'll talk about when I can. But if you're a brand that can't afford a Super Bowl ad and wants to get some real interesting awareness out there that actually drives sales, and we think about sales when we're doing stuff, it's not all vanity metrics, please reach out to us. We do all sorts of crazy stuff. We're known for doing things that are a little on the edgier side. And as you can tell by our conversation on the BeanCast, I'm never wrong. So you're never going to get something you're not happy with. So please reach out, theideaintegration.com.
And he's never wrong. You should put that on as your new slogan instead of the smartest man in the world. Well, Colin Glaum, you can find him at Benevolent Mercenaries. Most likely the best way to get in touch with him is via email or via the LinkedIn link that will be on the show notes. But tell us, what's going on in your world, Colin? What would you like to promote?
I'm actually going to promote something I just encountered last night. I think I said it earlier in the show. I have a huge affinity for the Goodby Silverstein organization, and they did a masterclass that I happened to check out last night. If you're a young person in advertising and you're listening to the BeanCast, which is very intelligent on your part, and you want to learn a little bit more, go check out that masterclass. It was you're not going to learn how to copyright, you're not going to learn how to design, but you're going to learn how to be a good steward of our industry and a better person overall. It was a very informative couple of hours I spent listening to them last night.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I saw that masterclass being advertised on all the ad press this week, so it was interesting that they're also participating in that. Jonathan Sackett, you can find him at allscope.com, also mashburnenterprises.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Jonathan. What would you like to promote?
Well, as always, I want to promote the show. I think, Bob, you and I have been friends for years. I love this show. I love it when people share it, and I love it even when people debate me on things, i.e. Colin. But
I'm sorry I was so contradictory today.
No. That's
maybe it's the earlier start time. I'm not sure.
Colin's a smart guy. So is Saul. Follow them as well. They're great people. I'd also like people to share this show. Follow me on Twitter at Jonathan Sackett. I'd like to congratulate Jamal Mashburn Jr. for signing on for his full ride basketball for the University of Minnesota. No, I had nothing to do with that, but I'm really excited for him, and that's going to be good for Minnesota basketball, to be sure. And the last thing I want to promote is Revolution Cannabis. We're almost done with the whole rebranding of them. They're opening 35 dispensaries in Florida. They've got them here in Chicago. They've got them in Maryland, like I said earlier, and Massachusetts. So be on the lookout for Revolution Cannabis, and my friends there, Tony Hunter, is the chairman. And I think that's it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really on a roll. I've been watching all the tweets that have been coming from you. They're doing a lot of stuff with that.
It's going to be great.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can even find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Colin, Leo Burnett, working with minimalist designer David Schwen, have designed ads for McDonald's that have no logo or other obvious indication of who the ad is representing, and yet still manages to clearly communicate McDonald's. I don't know about you, Colin. I mean, admittedly, I saw this in an article, and I knew it was McDonald's looking at the ad afterwards, but for me, it's so obviously still a McDonald's ad, even though it has no picture of the product, no logo, no indication at all. It was really great.
This does not belong in your fair category. This belongs in your exceptional category. This work is, as soon as I saw it, I was like, God, I felt that twinge of envy when you don't come up with an idea that you see that's genius somewhere else. There's been a couple of companies in recent months who have tried to do the no logo thing with varying degrees of success. I think the Doritos campaign was brilliant, but because they have a very basic product that's in a particular shape that allows them to do that. This one, the typography, the layout, the color choices, everything about it just screams the product, and you can almost taste it, and it's just a font, which is insane to me. So I kudos to the team who developed this. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I was super impressed with this one. So if you haven't seen the ads, go to the link on the show notes. You'll get the chance to see them for yourself. They're fantastic. Well, on the not so fantastic fail list, Aldi Australia is running afoul of both customers and now regulators, Saul, for advertising a great price on an air purifier, then only shipping as few as 1 or 2 units per store. Now, the practice known as baiting is very illegal in Australia. They have made it against the law to advertise about a product that you're trying to sell and only put enough product for you to meet some kind of minimum. So what do you think about this? I mean, it's kind of a miss on their part.
Yeah, it's just I have nothing witty to say about this one, except that, it's nice to see that our Black Friday mentality in North America is going all the way across the other side of the world and hitting Australia, because this is done all the time. It's gross and silly, but I have no witty comment.
Fair enough.
Black Friday, things on fire there. That was kind of witty.
There you go.
It was quasi-witty. We'll give him quasi on that one.
Well, on the foul list for this week, Jonathan, you would think that Airbus would be kind of flying high, pun intended, in the wake of Boeing's 737 MAX scandal, but alas, they are instead paying out $4 billion to regulators in France, the UK, and US for allegedly bribing national officials worldwide to approve the purchase of their planes. I'm like, what is wrong? We've got 2 airline companies, 2 plane manufacturers building passenger jets in the world, and both of them have corruption.
Well, it was so funny to me when I saw this story, because I thought, okay, wait a minute here. You've got 2 companies with 1 opportunity, and you both screw it up. My God. But, the one thing, the one saving grace here, if there is one, is I heard that they've been they had been investigated over the past year. So a lot of this stuff, I think it's just extremely bad timing for their decision to bribe. Not only was the decision to bribe terrible, but their timing was impeccable. Holy crap.
One thing I couldn't find is the people that they paid the bribe to, were those the same people they paid the fine to?
If you call it a bribe, we call it a fine, whatever.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag #FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly